Awesome. As Abe mentioned, my name is Dakota Hewlett. I'm with the Maine Department of Transportation. I am the active transportation planner here in Maine, the bicycle pedestrian coordinator. So I work with communities on all issues related to bicycle and pedestrian transportation, bicycle pedestrian safety, and transportation planning in relation to bicycle and pedestrians in our downtowns and villages and connections to areas that we need to get to, whether education or employment or residential areas or things like that. Work pretty closely with the nonprofit and advocacy side of things, and also serve as a subject matter expert here at MaineDOT when it comes to design of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So it's a diverse job. I get to work with a lot of different people, a lot of different communication. But it's been a great opportunity so far. So far I've been in the role just about 2 years now. Still learning a lot, I think. But it's great to talk with all of you today. I'm going to present today about some of the programs that we have available at MaineDOT from a planning perspective, and then also some of the programs that we have available that are a little bit more specific to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure planning, design, or development. And then would be happy to open it up for questions and conversation about the things that we do at MaineDOT. I do work in the Bureau of Planning at MaineDOT, so I have coworkers I work closely with that are really involved in a lot of the early planning of infrastructure projects when it comes to transportation in Maine. So those are planning studies, traffic studies, feasibility studies, working with municipalities to try to kind of morph our transportation system in the direction that it needs to go to serve the needs of our communities. So let's jump into some of the programs that we have at MaineDOT. There we go. So we're going to talk to you today about a program we have called the Planning Partnership Initiative Program. That is a locally initiated program that municipalities come to us and ask to participate in, where MaineDOT provides some cost sharing, some match to help hire a professional planning firm or consultant to do some work to try to address some of the goals that municipality and MaineDOT may have that we share in regards to the transportation system. So we're hiring a firm to do things like economic development studies in relation to transportation, active transportation plans, bike ped plans. These could be town-wide or maybe even slightly regional or parts of town, where we're planning for network level connections when it comes to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, or other things that would help support further bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure projects later on. Also doing studies like conceptual studies for villages and downtowns, sidewalk rehab, parking, traffic analysis, maybe taking a one-way road and studying what it would take to make that a two-way road, or things like that, or how to make traffic flow through a downtown a little bit more efficiently. All of those types of things could fall under our planning partnership initiative. We do a lot of these working with municipalities to try to help meet the goals and really provide a safe transportation system. This program, like many of our others, have a local match, and that local match requirement is based on a three-tiered approach based on the municipal valuation in the specific community we're working with. It's a great opportunity to take advantage of some resources at MaineDOT and some of the resources that the consultants in Maine have that are really good at doing this type of analysis and studying what might need to happen in order to meet a community's goal. So it's a broad program. We can study a lot of different things in relation to transportation in Maine. It's a great opportunity for a municipality to partner with the state to get that done. So I put this slide in. This is an older PowerPoint that I took some photos out of, but I really liked this picture, so I kept it in there because this is kind of the heart of what the planning partnership initiative work looks like. A lot of it is doing some public outreach, doing some community meetings, posting poster boards and maps the public can come and look at and draw on, and really kind of workshop what might need to happen to the transportation system in order to help fill some of those needs that we have. So this is a great representation of some of the things that we really get into with a planning partnership initiative study. And I think the value in this program is that we can really kind of dig into it, get down in the weeds, pull out the maps, and figure out what we need to do to improve the transportation system. So our Village Partnership Initiative program, the VPI, is one that we have established for the past few years and has really taken off. This essentially is how a municipality would work with MaineDOT on something that's similar to the Planning Partnership Initiative, but this is focused more on kind of village centers and downtown areas with a goal for real transformative projects that will transform that downtown or village area through different phases of work, beginning with that kind of study or feasibility level of work. And then if recommendations are identified that the town wants to move forward with, then design, construction, and potentially pursuit of large federal funding opportunities that may make implementation like that possible. So with a village partnership initiative, we're looking at, really scoping out downtown and village improvement projects that are going to cost maybe $5 million to upwards of $25, $35 million, in the large federal grant range of things here, to make transformative improvements to those transportation systems in the downtowns. So we're talking street level improvements, sidewalks, parking, street amenities, traffic flow, traffic signals, safety, of course, all of those types of things, anything that is related to that transportation system in the built up area, the downtown, the village core. That's what we want to look at. Really focusing on how we can provide safe access for all transportation system users. So increasing sidewalk connections, safer pedestrian crossings, could be things like bicycle lanes, multi-use paths, making sure that we have connections to neighborhoods or other places that folks are getting to and coming from when they're coming downtown. Again, there's a local match scale for this as well. And really, this is a program where we're looking for a community that wants to go through the entire process with us. So we have an idea, we want to study something, we want to see if it'll work, maybe do some conceptual work, hire a firm to really see what might fit, what might work, and what might be impactful in the community, and then try to run with that all the way through design and potentially pursue a large federal grant. And we have some great examples of municipalities we've worked with in the past few years in Maine who've now we worked together and have pulled down some large federal transportation dollars. Sanford, North Windham, a couple of projects in Portland recently that got some large federal grants as well. So this is one that we're really excited about, one that we see can really make large transformative changes and improvements to some of our downtowns and communities when we can partner with municipalities and find some common goals and use some of the tools that we have available to us to seek solutions to those goals or those problems that have been identified. A couple of examples, again, I mentioned kind of like holistic downtown planning and transformative studies, looking at the entire transportation system. So in many of Maine's downtowns, that's everything from face of building to face of building on the other side of the road. That's pedestrian scale lighting, it's sidewalks, it's on-street parking, it's the travelway itself. It's crossings, pedestrian crossings, things like that, traffic flow, all of those types of things are eligible, making sure that we're ADA compliant, making sure that we're connecting the things that need to be connected to. We're looking at the historic properties, we're looking at environmental concerns, we're all of that is on the table. And again, really focused on making some of our downtown areas more walkable, making access to those businesses and communities a lot easier, and of course, correcting any safety deficiencies that are out there already. So here's one that many of the municipalities have already maybe heard about. This one is a little bit less on the planning side and a little bit more on the implementation side. But our municipal partnership initiative was a cost-sharing program at MaineDOT, really trying to approach roadway infrastructure and trying to make that a little bit more streamlined for municipalities to work on the state or state aid road system in a cost-shared way to get some projects done that are important to the municipality. So we're focusing on the core road network here, primarily with the MPI program. Could be surface treatments like repaving. If a municipality really wants to get after a repaving project, and they'd like to get that done sooner than it might come up on our MaineDOT kind of cyclical paving cycle or schedule, those types of things, drainage improvements. So we've got stretches of road in town that just are not draining well. We have, we have some ponding or issues in the winter, those types of things. So that's what the MPI is for. A lot of that work actually gets coordinated through our MaineDOT region offices. We have 5 regions throughout the state. That's another one to be aware of in case your municipality is looking for some of those kind of core transportation system improvements that you'd like to get going and work with the department on. So I can certainly help you connect to the folks that help administer that program. That's a great one to be aware of because you never know when an MPI level project might come up. It could be paving related, or it could be related to an issue in the roadway. Something might come up next year or the year after that you're not even thinking about now. So just a great program to have in mind, and understand that we've got a couple of these avenues to approach the department for projects. So we're going to get into the bike ped stuff a little bit more now in my presentation. Talk first about Maine's bicycle and pedestrian funding program. This is the one that I administer, spend a lot of time on. So here in Maine, this is our version of the Federal Transportation Alternatives Program. This is how we select projects for transportation alternatives funding, which is federal funding, comes to us at MaineDOT to administer as a program, funding program eligible for projects that communities can apply for and work with us on to implement those projects. Primarily, these are really for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvements. So it could be new sidewalk or sidewalk reconstruction, talking about pedestrian connectivity, safe pedestrian crossings. It could be intersection improvements, making intersections safer for cyclists or pedestrians to navigate through. Could be a Safe Routes to School project, which is a project that is trying to connect schools to their neighboring residential areas and downtowns of places that students may be utilizing to access the school. Those are really important. Also, multi-use trails or bicycle connectivity, or even inter-community connectivity and connections between communities here in Maine. There's a lot of opportunity as far as project scope goes, as long as it is really genuinely improving bicycle and pedestrian safety, bicycle pedestrian connectivity in Maine. This program has an 80-20 share now, so the municipality would apply for the project and work with us through that application process. And if selected, would bring 20% of the cost of the project. MaineDOT would bring 80% of the cost of the project in federal funds to that project. These projects are usually implemented through a local agencies program. So that's where the municipality is able to implement a federally, federal transportation dollars, federally funded project through MaineDOT. We provide some guidance on how to, work with the restrictions and requirements that come with using federal transportation dollars to implement these projects. Most projects that come through this program come to us both for design and then funding for construction as well. You don't necessarily have to have your project fully designed when you come to us to talk about your project for this program, but we usually do fund kind of when we make one funding award for design and then another funding award again later when that project is ready for construction, and make that award based on the engineer's estimates from the design work, so we can be as accurate as possible and work with those communities through the design process. There are a couple other ways to do it if there's some unique circumstances, but most communities come to us with a project and we work through both design and then a subsequent construction phase. Reality there is that from the time you submit an application, you're looking at probably 3 years out for construction at that point, given the length of the design phase and the right-of-way process necessary for use of federal funds. So that is just something to keep in mind. Timeline-wise, you're looking at about 3 years for implementation from the application date. There may be some additional changes to this program coming for next year. Our applications are due on July 15th of every year. So we have one round call for projects every year. Those applications are due in July. But I'm happy to come out and meet with communities anytime to look at a project site, talk about project scope, where the project might be connecting to, things like that, how to make a competitive and eligible application for a project. If that's something that you think your municipality may have a viable project for this program, please do reach out. I work with communities year round on trying to develop some of these projects and make sure we have some great, strong applications coming in every July for this program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some new things happening at MaineDOT now for the rest of the presentation that I think are actually very relevant to bicycle and pedestrian safety, and some new things that might be available as far as programs from MaineDOT or new processes at MaineDOT that may be additionally beneficial for municipalities to know about. So I've been working with a team here at MaineDOT over the past year and a half or so, really tasked with the difficult task of trying to find a way to improve driver voluntary speed compliance. So what we mean by that is we really want to try to find a better way for actual speeds on our roadways to be the speeds that we want operating on those roadways. We want drivers to know how fast they should be driving on those roads and to then adjust their driving behavior to match that intended speed. You're all aware of the speed limit signs we see every day and things in our communities that kind of affect speed, but we wanted to dig into a lot of things that, why do drivers drive as fast as they do? What actually slows down a driver if we need to, if we're in an area that's built up and we really need to be focused more on safety and not on high speed, what tools do we have available to us to get those drivers to drive the speed we'd like them to? So through that work over the last year and a half or so, we came to the conclusion that MaineDOT should implement a context classification system, a roadway classification system, in order to better implement some guidance and some traffic calming measures and complete streets elements in some of those built up contexts where we expect to see slower speeds, where we expect to see higher instances of pedestrians and bicycles and pedestrian crossings, and those places we really want to operate more slowly at more of a human kind of transportation scale. Excuse me. So we have begun developing this roadway context classification system, and there will be some information on our website publicly very soon, yet this fall, on that. But we've determined that we're going to map all of the roadway system on a continuum of rural to urban in 5 context classes. So rural town, village, suburban, and urban. And once we have that mapping effort complete, we're then tying a new process for our speed limit setting methodology to that context. And what's a little bit different in that is the speed limit methodology will not just take into account observed speeds or existing speeds that drivers are driving on the roadway, but it will take into account the existence of sidewalk on one side of the road or the other side of the road or both sides of the road. The level of pedestrian activity, the amount of driveways in that segment, a lot of different roadway characteristics that help us get to, get that speed limit setting tool to give us an output that we think is appropriate for driver speed based on that context. Another really huge thing that is new, I think, for Maine, and as far as we know, any other state in the nation at this point, is that there will be capped maximums of speed limits that we would set with that new methodology based on the context. So based on the functional class of the road and the context, we would cap the speed limit that we would post in, say, an urban area at a much lower number than what would be the maximum posted speed limit in a rural area, of course. So those maximum caps then essentially help us fight that, common problem of drivers driving faster and faster over time, and speed limit setting processes being based on those observed speeds. So if those observed speeds continue to go up as drivers drive faster, our posted speeds would then kind of go up. But this cap is going to set a cap in each of those contexts to help fight that. Other things that we're doing to help speed management is we're creating a speed management toolbox. So these are going to be traffic calming items, traffic calming elements that can be implemented in different types of roadways. We can work with communities on identifying the best traffic calming element for different types of roadways and contexts, and trying to better track the success of those. So which tools do we have that are actually making drivers slow down? and which environments do they work best in, or are there certain tools that don't work in some environments, but they work better in other environments or contexts or types of roads. So we're really trying to understand traffic calming a little bit better, understanding how we can use the tools that we have available for us to help make a positive impact on speed when it comes to those developed contexts, those places where where we expect to see, our neighbors and our community members walking and bicycling and accessing schools and businesses and everything else in the community via whatever mode of transportation they're choosing and they're using throughout the community. So I wanted to share that. That's a really important part of some of the new things we are working on. There is a link. And I'm not going to play this video today, but I will make sure I send my slides and that link back to Abe, and you can share with the group. There's a new link for how we set speed limits. About a 4-minute video on that speed limit setting process that might be fun to check out if you're interested in that. We're also updating our complete streets policy here at MaineDOT. That update is complete and should be made public here soon when we release a brand new website for the agency. Some of the changes in our complete streets policy after our original one. So our original one was created in about 2014, 10 years ago or so, and was just the policy document itself. It said MaineDOT will consider the needs of all transportation system users in the work that we do, essentially is what that first policy said. And then after the last 10 years, we've realized, and our partners and advocates have helped us realize that having a policy is great, but what does that mean on a project by project level? Or what does implementation mean? How do different parts of our department see themselves reflected in that policy and see the work that they do as progressing the intent of that policy and really kind of making sure implementation sticks? So in addition to the policy, we've updated the policy language a little bit, but largely the intent of the policy is still very much the same. What is new? A couple of things is really how we're scoping projects, how we're defining infrastructure projects as we begin to get into funding them, designing them, and building them. So we have now a checklist, a complete streets policy checklist that most of our projects will run through very early on in their stages. That way, if we have a paving project or we have a bridge replacement or a road reconstruction, anything like that, that project will run through that checklist before design begins. And that checklist will help identify local plans. So if there's a comp plan, if there's a local bike ped plan, if there's a local plan for development in the area, we'll understand that, be aware of that, and then can potentially suggest some project elements to help better fit that context and that local planning effort in that project area. We're also going to be tying this to the same 5 contexts I talked about a minute ago, in recommending that in certain contexts, we expect to see certain complete streets elements. So sidewalks, bike lanes, other types of roadway elements that serve all different transportation users based on the context of the project at hand. So some major programs or some major policy changes coming on that side of things as well to help us better scope and deliver more accurately defined projects based on the context. So we're in an urban area. We want to be delivering projects that are not just serving vehicular needs, but they're serving the needs of people biking and walking there. Certainly, of course, ADA compliance and making sure things are as accessible as we can, making sure that we're delivering projects that actually are serving the needs of users that we expect to see in that area. So running right along with that kind of effort, I mentioned a lot of traffic calming when I was talking about our new speed limit guidance. In addition to traffic calming measures, we're also becoming more and more interested in working with communities on what we call demonstration projects or quick build projects, pilot projects. These are projects that are using temporary project materials. They could be things like just paint in the roadway. They could be flexible plastic delineators, those little poster bollards, usually white or yellow, that you may see in some places in the roadway. They could be even things like planters in some instances, rubber tough curb, different items that can be used in a temporary way to help change the look, feel, and operation of the roadway in an effort primarily for speed management or for for implementing things that will result in safer infrastructure out there. A great thing with these types of projects is that they are temporary, they can be changed, and they can be and kind of be a great way for us and for the municipality to try something out, to try a design in a temporary way to see if we can have a desired effect on the safety issues of a specific area. So we might be trying to lower the speeds of drivers by 5 miles per hour, or we might be trying to increase the crosswalk yield compliance rate of drivers at a crosswalk. We might be trying to change the radius of a turn in order to slow drivers more as they turn through the intersection. You can do a lot of different things with these types of temporary projects and be very creative and trying to get some solutions out there on the ground. And the great thing that I think MaineDOT is really interested in these for is that they can help us better identify locations that need permanent infrastructure improvements. So this is a great way to try something out. If we do find a solution that works for us and works for the municipality, then we can work together to try to turn that temporary installation into a permanent infrastructure change later on via an actual infrastructure project, whether we're building sidewalks or changing the geometry of an intersection, or lots of different things. Could be raised pedestrian crossings, anything that is an outcome I think we're really interested in now, because we want to be better about having more targeted safety improvements in communities in Maine and trying to implement things that are actually working. So if we can test them out first at a kind of a quick build, temporary pilot project basis, we find some things that work, we might be interested in working with those communities to find permanent ways to make implementation as well. So we're talking things like gateway treatments. As we come into a community from a higher speed environment, we want to make sure drivers are understanding the context has changed. Hey, you're not on a 55-mile-per-hour road now. You're now you're in a neighborhood. You're approaching the downtown. We want those gateways to, maybe be a little bit more narrow visually to make drivers aware that that context has changed and that their speed behavior should change as well. Really important to have municipal support for these temporary projects, because there can be a learning curve, there can be some headache involved in communicating what we're doing to the public, helping them understand how to drive through this area. Oftentimes people have driven through areas every day for a long period of time, and then something changes. And it can be really important to work with a municipality to communicate that to the public, communicate that to the neighbors, make sure they're understanding what we're doing on the roadway, why we're doing it, in order to promote that safety and the safety outcomes that we're actually looking for with the project. I say all of that just to make you aware, looking into the future, beginning in the spring, it is very, very likely that MaineDOT will have a brand new community-based initiatives program, a cost-sharing program, just like that PPI or the VPI programs that I mentioned a little bit earlier in this presentation, where we will be able to work together to cost share demonstration projects, these temporary pilot projects with municipalities. So if you're working with a municipality and you've got some ideas for trying out some of these temporary projects, please reach out to me. I'd like to get a couple of these in the queue as this new project, or this new program, new funding program becomes available. Funding is not available right today now for this program, but it's very likely as we release our work plan for next year, which is kind of our funding plan and our plan for all the projects we plan to do. That work plan is expected to have a brand new program where we can cost share some of these types of things with municipalities. So I just wanted to say that in case anyone has some ideas or is working with a municipality that could really benefit from doing a demonstration project with us. We've got some potential opportunities here as we get into 2020, get into the next year and have that funding available. We also may have a brand new funding program next year that helps fund small safety improvements focused on active transportation users. So people biking and walking and human scale transportation will be a small pot of money available for projects that improve those safety outcomes. So whether it's a couple of pedestrian crossings, could be RRFBs, those rectangular rapid flashing beacons you see at pedestrian crossings. It could be bump outs, could be raised pedestrian crossings. Something that we're really interested in seeing with these small projects is measurable safety benefits. So if we're working with towns that have some real safety concerns or have had crash history in the past with vulnerable road users, we want to work with them on doing some small implementations, really focused on measurable safety improvements and implementations that we can measure better driver behavior and safer outcomes in those project locations. So if any of that sounds interesting to you from communities you work with, please reach out. Love to have some conversations and get some of those types of projects lined up potentially for these programs that might be coming next year. So that is all that I had in my presentation. I want to thank you for inviting me. On the screen here, I've got three names: Steve Cole, Matt Dross, and Jared Farn-Gillette. They are regional transportation planners at MaineDOT, covering all of the five MaineDOT regions. We've got the state broken up into those five regions. So please feel free to reach out directly to them if you know what region you happen to be in. If you don't, feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you. If you do have transportation planning level thoughts or ideas you want to work with MaineDOT on, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. You can give me a call. My cell phone number is there. Email is there. If you have any questions, I may not know all the answers, but I can probably connect you to someone who does. I'm happy to continue the conversation yet today or answer any questions that may have come up.
Thanks for that presentation, Dakota. If anyone has any questions, you could paste them in the chat or raise your hand and let us know. I have maybe a few questions. That context mapping you mentioned is interesting. Where did that idea come from?
Yeah, great question. So when we were going through that kind of internal team effort, we did a lot of research with some other state DOTs as well as some transportation research organizations to learn from them what are they doing in regards to complete streets and in regards to speed management and really trying to get drivers to drive the speed you want them to drive. That was kind of our first goal that we were told to try to address with this internal team that we had. And we came across a research paper, I believe, from 2021 out of what's called NCHRP, the National Cooperative Highway something research program. And they had recommended an expanded kind of classification of roadways and then tying those classifications to measures that are more appropriate in those built up contexts or built up classifications to impact safety, impact driver speed, speed management, and complete streets elements. So we really like that idea. Maine being a rural state, much of our state road mileage is, definitely in that rural context. It is more or less, a higher speed context. There's probably, agricultural or recreational or residential land use along those rural road miles. So we understood that those types of areas and the driver behavior that might be more okay in those types of areas was not what we were looking for in our built-up context. Our rural villages in Maine, which are really important for us in Maine, as well as our urban communities in Maine. So we wanted to kind of break those out and make a distinction of the types of design guidance and the types of speed setting methodologies that are used in those different contexts. That's kind of how that came about. We're still in the early phases of it, but we're testing our new speed tool right now against the one that we've been using in the past and starting to get to the point where we're rolling into this new process.
That's really interesting. In the town where I live, the town is working on a comp plan right now, and one comment, or I gave the town a lot of comments about this, how a lot of roads in the town were built a long time ago when the town was a lot more rural, and they do have 40-mile-an-hour speed limits on them. People drive probably 10, 20 miles an hour over that limit. And that design of the road was from a time when there's almost no housing out in the rural parts of Raymond. And now you drive on a road every 250 feet, on average, there's a house. And there's a lot more people driving, but people still drive as if it was a rural highway in the 1950s. And there's almost no, and the whole context of the road has completely changed, but the driver behavior has not. And I just wondered how you might change that situation, but it sounds like you're working on that.
Yeah, yep. And just beyond speed limits, this context classification system will be used, in implementation of that complete streets policy I mentioned, and then also in potentially we're working toward in some of our design guidance. So where we will implement some things in the roadway to manage speed in an urban area that maybe we wouldn't implement in a rural area. And based on knowing, we know where these context zones are now. We know where, really kind of where our goal speeds are. We know where we want slow speeds in communities. We know where it's okay to have higher speeds in rural context. And making these just kind of different classifications, we can now then tie or tailor our guidance for design of things to those areas. So we don't have to have the same design guidance or the same kind of criteria for every road. We could say, this road, it's okay to design this because we really need it to be slower. Mhm.
So there's a few questions in the chat. Julie from Yarmouth asked about traffic calming techniques. Will Maine DOT facilitate use of interim approval tools like edge lane roads?
Yes, that is a good question. So that will have to be a little bit kind of on a to be determined basis and probably a case by case basis. I think we can be comfortable in saying we'll implement things that are approved in FHWA's manual on uniform traffic control devices, the MUTCD, which is kind of the standard for setting what we can do in the roadway as far as controlling traffic. That's striping, signing, signals, those things. I think the conversation can be opened when needed on experimentation. We've done it before in Maine with the new MUTCD. I don't know if we're gonna hold off on that a little bit until we adopt the new standards and then get back into experimentation based on what the new guidance is or not. But I think it's something that municipalities could approach us with on a case by case basis.
And another question for spring 2025, would funding for data collection tools like MyoVision be eligible?
Possibly. I know with those new programs that we expect to have coming out next year, data is going to be really important. We want to make sure that we can measure whether we're successful or not with speed management or successful with some of the safety interventions we'd like to work with municipalities on. So I know that getting that data can really be a barrier to obviously measuring success. I think we can get to a point where we would do that as well. Whether we provide equipment on loan that MaineDOT has, I know we have some of our own equipment. We've provided that to our MPOs and RPO communities before, or whether we provide an avenue for purchase of equipment. It's a little bit to be determined, but I think we're open to working through that as well because we want to make sure that we can make these decisions based off of that data.
So Joan has asked, it's great to hear about the upcoming active transportation safety program. Is the expectation that a portion of Maine DOT's federal safety funds will be dedicated exclusively to active transportation safety projects?
So that new program I mentioned would not be funded with uh, highway safety improvement funds. I believe that program is intended to be funded with state funding. And I think the primary reason or benefit for use of state funding there is that it would be much easier for us to implement those temporary quick build demonstration type projects with state only funding. If we had to follow some of the NEPA and environmental requirements that come with our federal funds for those quick build and demonstration projects, I think we'd be worried that they wouldn't be quick build at that point. There'd be a few extra steps, and it would take a little longer to go through the process. So we wanted to preserve maybe some of our state funds for use of that, so that we can have a little more flexibility and be a little bit quicker with those projects.
So I have another question for you. You're relatively new to Maine, right?
Yes, yeah.
What lessons have you learned from working as a planner in Maine?
That is a great question. I think as far as lessons and things that are specific to Maine, I think communication is really important here in Maine because it is a home rule state, because we are working with a lot of municipalities directly, directly municipal to state DOT relationships. that can be a little bit unique. I know some of the larger states out west have county road jurisdictions and larger jurisdictions that are doing things um, kind of on behalf of municipalities or kind of conglomerating those large geographic areas as far as jurisdictional planning. So communication for us is super important because we have so many smaller municipalities in Maine, being the state that it is. We want to make sure those lines of communication are open and we're communicating regularly. We can get things done and make sure we're understanding each other clearly because we don't have those like county governments that are doing transportation work like some states do. So we have so many conversations going on with so many different municipalities at the same time that we just want to make sure we're making sure that communication is as effective as possible so we can keep each of our municipalities kind of progressing forward. Um, I have emails in my inbox from lots of different municipalities all the time. So it's really important from my perspective for myself and working with them to make sure that we're moving those conversations forward and efficiently because I'm doing a lot of that work directly with each municipality. I think we've got, a few other unique things in Maine too. I'll mention obviously our weather and our climate, and just the historic nature of our villages in Maine. And that can be something that is tough to balance. We've done a lot of these planning studies over the past couple of years with communities, and they're trying to fit as much as they can in the right of way between, from one building face to the building face across the road because the community is so much older and our right of ways are narrower than a lot of other Western states. So we just have to be aware that we're balancing all that we can, working together to do that and identify the goals that we have, because we don't have that extra width that some of our friends in the West have, with those larger downtown areas and those larger roadways. We have to work with what we've got, which means we're often really balancing a lot.
I I'm from Maine. I grew up in Maine, and I often wondered, working as a planner, one of the most difficult areas we worked in was in Gray, where the village has, I think, 5 or 6 different state routes that converge
Mhm.
right in the center of the village. It makes it difficult to make the village more walkable. And I often wondered, like, what is the history of this? Why did they do this? Why are these state roads right in their village? And I looked up, I've done a little research on this. 1901, Maine passed legislation that enabled towns to designate the main thoroughfare in their town as a state road. And then once they did that, the state would provide funding to maintain that road.
Mhm.
And I think when people did that, they didn't realize what would happen 100 years later or 120 years later, where these roads, there's been a lot of development, it's changed, and there's often not enough room to accommodate everything that's needed now.
Mhm.
Um, but again, and speaking bigger picture or just more in general, how would you say Maine compares to a state like Michigan, where you're from originally?
I think we are doing some really great things when it comes to active transportation and when it comes to making some adjustments, in kind of our statewide system or our statewide processes that we have, at least at our agency, in accommodating, a little bit better active transportation users, people biking and walking a little bit more than we had, of course, beginning maybe in the 60s on through. I think one of the real benefits that we have in Maine is just being a smaller state. We're able to act a little bit faster, able to be a little bit more flexible. In larger states, there is just so much infrastructure out there that it I don't know how they manage it all. So I think we're doing better than I think some states are. And I find always internally at MaineDOT, people are really receptive to talking about new ideas, more or less. We may not get to a yes, on every new idea, but I've never gone to leadership internally and been told that they wouldn't even talk about it. I've always had great reception on at least trying to talk about new ideas or thinking about how we could adjust a process or adjust, maybe making design exemption or something to make something a little bit better. So I think here in Maine we're really tied to our small communities, our rural villages, and we want to continue to work in that direction to help make them more walkable and bikeable and kind of back the way they were probably decades before. Mhm.
Well, thanks. I don't have any more questions. I don't know if anyone else has any questions or would like to say anything, comment on anything, but not hearing any other questions, I think we can wrap up for today. So thanks for joining us, Dakota. Thanks for that presentation. It was really interesting and really exciting to hear about the work you're doing at MaineDOT. So next month on November 1st, we're going to have Abby Sherwin and Karina Grader from SMPDC who will present about sustainability and resilience. Thank you for joining us today and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Dakota. Thanks
Thank
everyone for
you.
participating.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone.